No, I want to touch a little bit again on the matter of hypermasculinity, because, and this is going back to our colonial past. If you look at Hilary Becker's work, he talks about an experience that African men, enslaved men had. And there was a deliberate attempt of the white masters to infantilize black men. That's the word that he uses. So he talks about infantilization. There's a deliberate attempt to cause men to almost be like children. So the slave masters would use men's bodies. They would call them names like boy, yeah, call them names to say that you are not a man. And as a result, when after emancipation, black men almost had to work hard to prove that they are in fact men. And in doing so, there was the development of a kind of a hyper-masculinized identity, as it were, right? So there is this thing, and one way of doing it is to be anti-women, So, and this is not only the experience of black men. We see it among many other places too. But certainly within our context, we see that anything that is woman-related or feminine is cut off from men. So I remember when I was teaching high school, if somebody says something, if a boy says something that seemed feminine or seemed, to lean in that direction, the other boys would say ash, fire, volcano, Why? 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 Right? Because how dare you, as a man, identify with something that is associated with women and with females? You have to cut it off, right? Professor Clinton Hutton has an article in 2014 issue of Caribbean Quarterly, titled The Gallification of Man. I don't know if anybody has ever read that. But he talks about how even among men, we use language to feminize other men for different reasons. So when a boy does something, and the truth is, I want to say to you, let me tell you, the things that I'm talking about have been culturally entrenched, they are ingrained, and it's going to take hard work to get them out of our way of thinking. Because, among even the most learned men, those who in the studies, when they see a boy crying, they might say, what are you behaving like that, yeah, girl? Yeah, girl? And to cause a boy to feel less than, you call him a girl. You call him a girl. A girl. So Clinton talks about how language is used to cause almost as if to rank men. So there are some men who are more men than others. There are some men who are more men than others. What kind of man do you want to be? What kind of man do I want to be? Do I want to be a man, or do I want to be an almost man? So these are some of the things. And the truth is, men may not think about these things these ways, but it is a part of their experience, right? It's a part of the experience. And it impacts on their emotions, it impacts on their mental health. There are, among men, we've seen instances of suicidal ideation among boys who have those kinds of experiences. So they want to kill themselves because of things that are said to them by people in their own families or by their peers. They don't feel as if they are real men, right? So there are multiple things. And I'm moving away now from the lyrics. We're talking about race and colonial legacy. First, I'm moving away a little bit. Because as a part of our hyper-masculinized identity is this idea that we have a role where we ought to be providers. Do you know this? And I'm sure if I canvass in this room and ask the females here, they would say, yes, a man must provide. Not true. We believe it. And Marky, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. I'm just saying it is something that we believe, right? And we don't believe that women ought to provide the same way. Even when a woman is making more money than a man, there's a belief that the man must still supporter. I've heard women say, my money is my money, his money is our money. Yeah, man, I've heard it. There's an expectation that a man must provide. And I'm sure among us as men, some of us hold on to it too. You know, let me tell you how it impacts us. I remember when my wife, just had babies, you know, as they were growing up. I never had the experience before, but after they were born, I was pressured every evening I'm going home. I need to stop at the supermarket. What do I need to stop at the supermarket for? I'm not sure, but I need to ensure that there is food in the house. And it became pressuring on me, you know. I started to feel anxious. And I realized that no, Warren, you're pressuring yourself too much. Why are you pressuring yourself this way? Why are you getting so anxious? And I realized I had this idea that I must always ensure that the family is provided for. There's nothing wrong with the idea, but it was pressuring me in a way that you know, I had to really thought and process. And there are many men who are so pressured. There's this idea that if you can't, well, there are many of us who grew up in the Christian tradition, right? There's a verse in the Bible that says, the man who can provide for his family is worse than an infidel, worse than an unbeliever, right? So there is this pressure that we have a responsibility as men to provide. Now think about it in our context, where there are many men who struggle to provide. How impact upon their mental health? It does. It does, because even those of us who can, who don't struggle as much, feel the burden. Yes, feel the burden of you know, this role. What about those who struggle to do it? So here, men have all kinds of issues, experiences that impact upon them and cause them to experience, I want to say, emotional or mental duress. Yeah. And then we are faced with other issues here. One, let me before I go there, let me use an example to make the point. I took my grandmother to the doctor yesterday. You know, she has a periodic visit. And she's coming from the country to Kingston, so I went with her. And she was telling me about developments at her family doctor's office. And she says there is now a psychiatrist who works at the office, because there are more people now who need psychiatric services. That's not the language she used, but in the psychiatric services. She said she went there, she wasn't sure what was happening. And she said she saw a man well-dressed, probably like me, in a suit, going in, looking like a bank manager. So she said to him, she said, oh, he's one of the doctors. She said to the receptionist, oh, he's one of the doctors now. And she said, him? No, sir, I'm Madam Ahmad. You know, I'm Madam Ahmad. So there's this idea that the truth is, as men, we're supposed to hold it down. We're not supposed to man, right? So the fact that that man was there to see the psychiatrist, there was this assumption that, boy, I'm mad, I'm mad. So either you're mad or you're stable. You can't be in a place where you're seeking mental health support. You can't be in a place like that. So there's some stigma that is attached to men seeking mental health services from a counselor, a psychiatrist, or any other kind of therapist. There's a stigma to it. But I want to believe, though, that things and times are changing, and people are becoming more open to the need for mental health services, even men, to the need for mental health services. But the truth is, as men, because of how we have been socialized, it takes a certain kind of maturity and you know, and truth to ourselves to say we need to see somebody. Because I don't know how many men inside here are married where your wife say, let us go and see a counselor. Let us go do a check-in. You don't want to do that, because as men, we're supposed to hold it down. As men, you know, we're not supposed to be talking our business like that to people. As men, nobody should know that we are seeing a counselor. So there are all these things, the stigma, the social expectations that are weighing down on us, that keep us limited in terms of seeking mental health services. Marky, I don't want to go into the argument that there are not enough mental health services here. That is one factor. But the truth is, there's a reluctance among men to seek help. As a result, men struggle silently through substance addictions, turn to substances to cope. We end up with anger issues because of repressed emotions. And of course, there are many of us who have post-traumatic stress disorder and other stress-related disorders because of the culture and the context in which we live. There are many, I remember talking with a young man from an inner city community many years ago. I was just trying to go through, let me say, a chronology with him of his life. And he couldn't do it. The two major points in his life was when his mother died and when the war began. When his mother died and when the war in the community began. Those were the two things that he was sure about, but everything else had to be related to that. Was it before your mother died? Was it after the war began? Was it before the war? Other than that, he couldn't really tell anything. And I'm sure, in hindsight, I'm sure that he was suffering from a stress-related disorder. I can't diagnose, but I was pretty confident, right? So there are ways in which we experience issues as men. Either we're going to self-medicate on alcohol, or we're going to find other unhealthy outlets, whether through violence, aggression. If you look at intimate partner violence, there are many men who are perpetrators of intimate partner abuse who are themselves struggling with different kinds of mental health issues tied to the harmful masculinity traits that we learn, right? So, there is a need for men to begin to think about how do we embrace health in its fullness. I want to say too that what we see happening with men and our reluctance to seek mental health services is also tied to our reluctance in general to seek health services. Because for men, we only go to the doctor when we're almost dying. We're not going before. I don't know why. We're sick, but we can't do any better than when we go to the doctor. So there's a cultural change that needs to take place about how men see themselves, how men see our relationship with our bodies, because there are many of us. I want to, please permit me to go into further. I teach a class on men and masculinities in the Caribbean, and there's a topic I usually like to teach. And it's about men's relationship to their bodies. Because there are many of us, we are the big boss on campus until you get to the point where there's bodily recalcitrance. There are things that we want the body to do that the body can't do anymore. There are things that we want the body to do that it can't do anymore. So men with hypertension and diabetes want to mash it up and can't mash it up because the body is not responsive. That also impacts on mental health issues, right? Then there are some of us, because of stroke and other issues, we want the body to move a particular way, and it can't move that way anymore. I remember, and I'm going to close with this, many years ago, before my grandfather died, he had a stroke, and he was bedridden for quite a number of years. And one day we took him to an event. So we took him up, and he didn't want to go. And we were taking him to, we put him in the car, we're driving him. And when he passed some of the people who used to be his friends, he started to cry. And he wasn't crying because he was in pain. He was crying because he did not want them to see him that way. He didn't want them to see him that way. Because as men, we're supposed to be in control. As men, we're supposed to, the body is supposed to do what we want it to do. As men, we're supposed to be in charge. But when the body in which we live doesn't respond, it affects us. It affects us in a way that some of us can't imagine. So there is a need for a fuller understanding of how men experience mental health issues, and there's a need for more services that are responsive to men. I think I have spoken enough. Thank you very much.